If you had told me when we started that we would be a predominantly cafe chain, that was not the original vision that we had for the company. Coffee has a bit of a cool factor that tea doesn't have.
Cappuccino, Americano, or a cortado? What is your favorite?
I drink Americanos all day.
How many cups of coffee a day do you drink?
Anywhere from 4 to 6.
What's the worst cup of coffee you've ever had?
Nescafe instant coffee. That's probably one of the worst cups of coffee I've had.
If you had no other coffee in the world but instant coffee, would you have it or would you go with it?
I'd get green tea instead.
For a nation that loves its chai, one wonders why coffee, and that too gourmet coffee, has become such a craze. And one of the brands at the forefront of that is what I'm talking about today in this episode of The Disruptors. We're speaking with Matt Chitharanjan of Blue Tokai at this lovely space in Mumbai at this cafe to understand the story behind Blue Tokai and why India has started loving its coffee so much. Matt, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's start with the story of Blue Tokai. And you know, if people are wondering why we have so much coffee here, is because we're going to get Matt to do a little explainer for us on which coffee is what. But before we do that, let's start with the story of Blue Tokai and why everything is blue. What's the idea here?
So Blue Tokai was started in 2012 by my wife and I. We were both at points in our careers where we were looking to do something on our own, and we were really struggling to find a good cup of coffee. So we were in Delhi, and at that time there was the cafe coffee days, some international brands like Costa, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, but all of them were selling kind of a commodity coffee product. So I grew up in the US and I was exposed to specialty coffee culture there. And so I was looking for a good cup of coffee that you would get in the third wave. So we started doing some research. We found that there were estates who were growing very high quality coffee, but they weren't focused on the domestic market. They were exporting their coffee to places like Japan, Europe, but none of them were interested in selling the coffee domestically. They felt that Indian consumers weren't ready to pay for the quality of coffee that they were offering. We felt something different, so we went down south. We convinced them to sell us their export quality coffee, and then we launched the brand in 2013. Now, Blue Tokai comes from the logo, which is a peacock. So peacock is the national bird of India. We really wanted to create an identity that was reflective of where that coffee comes from. So if you go to the coffee estates, you'll often see peacocks flying around the estates. And honestly, the blue is because it sounds better than red Tokai. We needed a color to go along with the name.
Okay. So fairly simple. So 2013, you start the brand. You start in Delhi. Which is your hometown, and now cut to 2025, you're over 130 outlets countrywide. It's also a very different time. I mean, I know you've opened your first international outlet as well. It's no longer the days of, like you said, one CCD, one barista, one coffee bean. Starbucks is here in every corner. You have international brands, and then you have this whole movement of homegrown Indian coffee makers who have the same idea that you do. What is it looking like today?
I would say today is much more encouraging to be running a coffee brand than it would have been in 2013 when we started. Coffee culture in India has really taken off in the last few years. You see it just by the number of cafes that are being opened up. Now you can go to any town across the country and there'll be at least 1 or 2 places that are serving good quality coffee, which never was the case when we started. So while it may seem that there's a lot of brands coming up and a lot of competition, I think it's also important to understand that there's only around 5,000 branded coffee shops in the entire country. And if you think of the size and scale of India, 5,000 is really a drop in the bucket. So we're happy that there's more coffee shops opening because all of these different brands have different styles of communicating with customers, different USPs. Ultimately, that's helping to grow the overall market for us.
What's your USP? I mean, how do you separate yourself from a lot of gourmet brands? And every city has its favorites, actually.
Yeah.
Every locality now has its favorites for people who are willing to pay more for a premium cup of coffee. So what is your USP?
So product has always been core to us. That's something that we've never wavered from. We started this company because we wanted to have good quality coffee, and that's really been the bedrock of everything that we do. So right now we have the widest sourcing network in the specialty industry in the country. There's more than 50 estates that we work with to source the green coffee from. growers that are doing amazing work at the farm level, because ultimately our coffee will only be good as what happens down there. We've also started partnering with small-scale growers, which are the majority of growers in the country. So we help provide them with technical assistance to improve the quality of coffee. In some cases, we process that coffee fruit ourselves. Then we operate 3 roasteries across the country. So one is getting good quality raw material, but then how you roast that and extract that flavor is incredibly important. That's something that we've always been doing ourselves. It's been something that we've invested a lot of time, money, and effort to be able to really roast that coffee expertly and consistently. Then it's being available. So our idea for the brand is that anytime you want a good cup of coffee, no matter however or wherever you like to drink it, Blue Tokai should be the brand that you go to. So we operate 135 cafes across the country, but we also have a very strong presence on e-commerce, on quick commerce, and then also in offices as well.
Okay, so all of which you described about sourcing the right coffee, roasting it the right way, and focus on quality. Again, and at the cost of sounding repetitive, there are more and more brands who also say the same thing and are doing the same thing. And say that, look, we get our own coffee, we roast it ourselves, we do it in a quality fashion. Then what makes you stand out? And more coming in.
Yeah, so I think there's some nuance. One is coffee is subjective. So it could be that you like a particular style of coffee that brand A has. Someone else like a particular style of coffee that brand B has. But access and convenience is very important. Very few people are willing to go to the other end of the town for a particular cup of coffee, no matter how much they might prefer it over someone else.
Yeah.
So can we be the brand that's most accessible? Can we be in the places where you frequent regularly, so that it's very easy for you to get a good cup of coffee. You don't have to think twice. Oh, I'll go to Blue Tokai. I know it's consistent. I know it's high quality. I don't have to travel anywhere else to get that. So I think that's a big advantage for us.
And how do you maintain consistency? I think that gets to be another big question mark, because a lot of the process of making coffee is also on the skill of the barista.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure,
and
sure.
then you need to make sure that that's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to be in the quick commerce space, which you are now.
So I think it all starts at the roastery, right? So one is we have very strong processes to ensure the coffee that's going to the cafes is roasted to a very high quality level and very consistent. So one is we've invested a lot in the technology that we have and the roasteries. We recently put in place new Italian roasting machines, which are designed to extract better flavor from the coffee. There's a software program that's layered onto that so we can ensure that coffee is roasted consistently every time. Then at the barista level, at the cafe level, we spend a lot of time on training. So there's an intensive training program that all the baristas undergo through. Then they go into on-the-job training, plus we layer that on with a learning management system so they can do online training as well. And then we equip them with tools and technology to ensure that they are brewing the coffee consistently. So if we're roasting the coffee consistently and it's being brewed consistently, that's 80% of the job done.
Okay. Then making it is not as tough, you're saying.
It can be taught to someone. It's not, we don't do automatic machines, so it's not a push button solution, but we equip the baristas with training and tools to help make their job easier.
Yeah, absolutely. If it was a push button solution, I don't think you could charge that premium for it.
Yeah, and that's not the experience that we want to deliver to customers also.
All right, let's do a quick coffee lesson for the coffee snobs and for those who want to show off that they know all of their coffees, because remember, this is still a growing culture. So we have 5 cups here. Matt, why don't you take us through this and tell us which one is which? How do you identify which coffee is which, and which one you think is the best?
Sure. So they've been sitting here for a little while, so you see the color has changed a bit, but this would be a cappuccino, which is the most popular coffee that we offer. Cappuccino has espresso, steamed milk, and foam in equal proportion. So if you see, this should have quite a lot of foam still on the top. I think cappuccino is the most popular because it's the default one that everybody knows what cappuccino is, so that they order that by default. Next would be the flat white, which is very similar to a cappuccino but has less foam. So only the top layer here has foam, and the rest is steamed milk and espresso.
So it's a slightly stronger cup.
This will actually be stronger because this has more milk than a cappuccino, because when you foam the milk, you use less milk. The strongest cup will be the cortado, which is espresso and a small amount of frothed milk. So this would be the strongest way.
Okay.
Now, coming to black coffee, which is what I drink, this is an Americano, which is just espresso topped up with hot water. So this will have a punch from the espresso shot, whereas this is a pour over, which is a manually brewed coffee. So that you ground coffee and then you slowly pour hot water over the top. This gives a more balanced, slightly lighter coffee compared to an Americano.
Okay, so what is the best seller that you see?
Cappuccino is the number one
Cappuccino
seller.
always. You know, in terms of where Indian consumers are in their journey of understanding coffee and moving forward, what are the changes you've seen over the last several years? You've been doing this since 2013. Is it a very, very different market today?
I would say interest in coffee is significantly higher now than it was previously. There was always a niche consumer who understood coffee previously. That segment has grown, but more and more people are interested in coffee. As more and more people are interested in going to cafes. Coffee has a bit of a cool factor that tea doesn't have. And so as the country has grown and more people have had more disposable income, they're choosing to spend that on coffee than if I looked at compared to 10 years ago.
And are you seeing that now move beyond your tier 1 cities? You know, since the pace at which you've moved to 135 locations, I'm just trying to understand, is most of the contribution in the top 6 cities?
Yeah, but that's more of a business decision for us, not that there isn't demand in other cities across the country. So Starbucks is around 450, but they're at 79 cities throughout the country. So that's they're everywhere. So that just tells you the depth of the market and the demand for coffee in all cities across India.
Do you aim to be the next Starbucks or the Indian Starbucks?
I don't want to comment directly on another brand, but our goal is not to be Starbucks. Starbucks is a second wave company. We're a specialty coffee company. So for us, ensuring the quality of the coffee that we offer is very important. Do I think there's potential for us to get to 400, 500 outlets in the country? Absolutely.
No, so explain the difference to me between what did you say? You're a specialty coffee and they're a second wave coffee shop.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
So the second wave of coffee happened in the, I think, 80s or 90s when these coffee chains started blossoming up and that became kind of the dominant type of coffee. Third wave of coffee is where you really focus on the origin of where that coffee comes from. So that means visiting farms, sourcing coffee from farms that are really paying attention to good quality coffee. There's actually a technical scoring. You have to score above 80 points on a 100-point scale for it to be considered specialty. But more broadly, it just means that focusing on quality in every step of the process. So sourcing good quality coffee, roasting that coffee very carefully, and then paying a lot of attention on the brewing end. So it'd be very rare that you'd see a third wave coffee doing automatic machines because the technology in the automatic machines is not yet to the point where you can extract the best flavor out of that coffee.
So I think we need to get a masterclass from you on how to make the best cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Because you also provide the beans. Blue Tokai also sells the beans. So we'll definitely do that where we get the focus on, if you're buying it at home, how do you make a good cup of coffee? It never tastes the same.
Yeah.
So why does it not taste the same?
So one is that the equipment to get, the equipment that we have in the cafes that costs, the espresso machine itself costs 8-9 lakhs. The grinder costs another 2 lakhs. So very few people are willing to invest that much of money in a home setup. But it can be made very consistently if you just have a scale and pay attention to the recipe. So I think the number one thing that people can invest in to improve the quality of coffee that they're making at home is buy a grinder. Grinding the coffee fresh makes a big difference. And then getting a scale to make sure that you're doing the same recipe every time.
Yeah. In terms of, this journey for you, Matt, and we talked a bit about, you started, you didn't like the cup of coffee that you had around you, and then you started this off. But when did the real lift-off take place? In 2013. At that point, how easy or difficult was it to raise funds? You've now recently raised another round of funding. What was the scenario then?
So in 2013, we started very simply. It was Normit and I operating out of a spare bedroom in her parents' house. So we scrapped together a little bit of money. We got a small tabletop roaster, a small grinder, and we launched the brand with a few lakhs of investment, very simply, selling online, and that's sort of the origins of it. So from there, we started selling B2B, so we tied up with a few offices, a few other cafes, got some initial traction, hired some employees, We ended up moving into another room in Namrata's parents' house, and then it kind of reached an inflection point of where we had to decide, did we want to keep it kind of a mom and pop lifestyle business, or did we want to raise outside capital and scale? We felt that the opportunity to sell good quality coffee, to sell specialty coffee in India was too large. That if we didn't take, if we didn't scale, whatever first mover advantage we had developed up to that point would be lost by someone else and could really threaten our business. So that's when we decided to reach out to people, and we raised our first round of funding in 2014.
So 2013 you start out of a spare bedroom with a few lakhs of investment. 2014 is your first round of funding. What would be the top line of the company today?
Right now we're at a 400 crore run rate.
Yeah, and what do you aim for it to be?
So we're targeting to reach 1,000 crore run rate in about 2.5 years.
Wow. So that's a huge jump. And do you think that if you started off today, I'm trying to understand if it was a mix of just also the vision and also the timing, right place, right time. If you started off today,
I mean, so
what would that picture look like?
Now it'd be a bit harder to establish the scale that we're at because there's brands like us and several other brands who have reached a certain scale. So you would have to come up with a different proposition for customers in order to sort of differentiate yourself from the players that are in the market here. I think in 2012 when we started and 2013 when we launched, it was early. The first couple of years were a bit of a slog, though, it was very slow and steady. And really now is when we've seen kind of the coffee market take off. So I think there's definitely opportunities. I think there's tons of opportunities for people to open standalone coffee shops. I think that's an incredible business for people to be in. I think, every neighborhood could have a standalone coffee shop. But to get to a scaled business now, I think it's a bit more challenging than it would be when we were doing it.
And in this journey, because a lot of people watching this may be people who want to start their own businesses, could be in F&B, could be in any space.
Yeah.
And you always look at someone who's tasted that success, in this case you, and Namrata, of course. And then you wonder, was it a one-way street? Did it just go to plan year after year after year?
I don't think. I would love to meet the person where that's happened for, who started a business and everything has gone according to the spreadsheet projections.
Yeah.
No, there's been so many ups and downs. And
what was the worst?
COVID was definitely the worst. COVID
Yeah.
was the worst because, we were operating, I think, 20 to 30 outlets at that time, had a decent amount of staff, and that business went to zero. So we had to make and at that point in time also we were in a fundraising process, so it's not like we had a lot of reserves that we could rely upon. And it was actually a point, and whatever fundraising round, obviously that got pulled because of all investors were uncertain about what the world was going to be like. So we had to make, cuts to staff, everybody had to take a pay cut, had to really do a lot of things in order just to ensure that the business survived. So that was definitely the hardest time that we faced.
And then what was the comeback like? Was the post-COVID revenge consumption on everything really the wind beneath your sails in that sense?
Yeah, so we were fortunate in that we had been omni-channel for quite a long time. So at least during COVID, when the lockdowns were happening, the online business took off and was really able to support us to some extent. I think one positive that came out of COVID is that people got used to the convenience of ordering on the apps. So even when things started opening up and revenge dining started happening, we still saw that delivery continued to grow as a share of the business. And now we're sitting at close to 40% of the revenues from the cafes coming from delivery. And I think COVID was a big boost to leading to that behavior change. India doesn't have a strong coffee takeaway culture. I think the infrastructure of our cities are not really conducive to grabbing a cup of coffee and walking to work.
Yeah.
So that behavior has really shifted to delivery. So
we want everything delivered, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a convenience aspect associated with
Yeah.
it, but I do think that if sidewalks were nicer and cities were nicer places to walk around, people would be happy to grab a cup of coffee and walk around a neighborhood. It's just right now the cities are not built that way.
Do you think that you have a proposition that could ever go mass on scale for a brand like yours, or would you want to keep it premium and that's the plan? And does that make more sense?
Yeah, I don't ever want to compromise the quality of the offering that we have. So if being mass in scale means having to degrade, I don't want to reduce to make it cheaper. Use cheaper coffee, use cheaper food ingredients, introduce cheaper bakery. That's not the vision that any of the founders of our company have. So, and it's also that's something that our investors are pushing for.
So how are you going to do that if you have to deliver coffee in 15 minutes? Because I know you've tied up with Snack, which is what Swiggy is trying to do in this whole 15-minute rush.
Yeah.
How would you keep this quality that we've been talking about?
So I think on delivery for coffee, the taste maintains. Even after 30 minutes, 35 minutes, what happens in a cappuccino is it won't come with the foam on top. And I think customers understand that there's some trade-off for the convenience aspect, so that no one really expects a cappuccino to be delivered with a good amount of froth, because that's just not possible. So I think that trade-off customers are willing to accept, and that's a quality for convenience trade-off as well.
Okay, so you don't think that there's going to be any compromise on quality with quick commerce?
No.
What do you make of the quick commerce craze right now, and not just on coffee? I think the big push across the space, because those worlds intersect for you as well, is faster. Let's get everything done faster.
Yeah.
In a way, it's the complete opposite of your process, right?
No, so I mean, if you can do it faster and still deliver a high quality product, everybody would love that, right? So even if I look at my own consumer behavior, there are days when I order 4 or 5 times from these apps, just because it's very convenient to have, I forgot some, I feel like having a juice right now, so I'll get a juice delivered. So I think it's important to understand what customers want and to have products that suit those customer desires. And I do think that that's going to be an important lever for all brands going forward, because it's hard to imagine a use case for someone going to our website, entering their details, waiting 2 days for that coffee to come, when in 15 minutes they can get that same coffee packet delivered to them from quick commerce. So we see quick commerce as where more of the higher selling SKUs will be placed, because it's important that we have rapid turnaround, because there is a shelf life associated with coffee. And on the website, we can have the longer tail of our complete offering. So if there's a particular, like a unique lot of coffee that we have, that will only be available on our website. If there's, some of the slower moving SKUs that still have a cult following, those will all be available on the website. But the top sellers will be available on quick commerce.
Okay, so you think that there's space for quality and speed to both coexist?
Definitely.
In terms of advice, really, Matt, to anyone looking to scale up a business, to starting out, and we know that most new businesses end up faltering and failing. What would you say has been your biggest learning in your journey so far?
Yeah, I think you have to have a lot of perseverance. There's, like we were talking earlier, there's very few businesses I know that have gone completely according to plan. We've had to make many sort of, not necessarily pivots, but focus on different verticals at different times in our journey, because those were the levers that were performing well at that time. If you had told me when we started that we would be a predominantly cafe chain, that was not the original vision that we had for the company.
Oh, what
it was just to sell coffee online and wholesale. Cafes have a lot of challenges associated with them, finding good real estate, managing people, managing compliance. There's a lot of issues. On the flip side, there's so many great things that come out of having a cafe. You get to interact with customers on a daily basis. You get real-time feedback. And I think people enjoy a good cafe experience. So now we've been able to, over the last few years, we've really leaned into being more cafe forward, whereas in the past we were more product forward.
And what do you see as the journey? Does your company continue in this way? How necessary is it to keep innovating, pivoting, changing? Or do you need to be consistent with what you're offering?
No, so I think the next couple of years will be more about expanding the cafe, because that's where we see more consumer demand coming. More people are asking and wanting to visit cafes. but maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, then the product business can, the original vision of being more product-led can come into fruition, because at that point in time, coffee culture will evolve. So you have to be very attuned to kind of what customers are looking for within the industry you're operating. Right now, it's more cafes. I think 4 or 5 years down the line, it'll be like other markets where people are brewing more coffee at home.
Oh, so you see the at-home coffee brewing also coming in on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the journey of Blue Tokai, and of course so much more to go. It's also reflective of the entire movement of coffee and a class of Indian consumers who are willing to pay more for quality. Definitely an exciting space to be in. Thank you.